to Legacy Builders, Strategies for Building Successful Family Enterprises, brought to you by Beacon Family Office at Asante Financial Management Limited. I'm your host, Corey Gagnon, Senior Wealth Advisor, and on this show, we explore global ideas, concepts, and models that help family enterprises better navigate the complexities of family wealth. Today, we welcome Steve Legler, Senior Consultant at Blackwood Family Enterprise Services. Steve is a distinguished figure in the family enterprise field, known for his unique approach to family legacy and wealth transition. Steve is an accomplished author, penning two influential books, Shift Your Family Business and Interdependent Wealth, which have significantly contributed to thought leadership in family enterprise management. He serves as a faculty member for the Family Firm Institute's Global Education Network program and is a member of the Wisdom Expedition for the Purposeful Planning Institute. Steve's expertise is further showcased as one of the hosts of Family Enterprise Canada's Let's Talk Family Enterprise podcast. Balancing his role as a consultant, facilitator, and coach, Steve is deeply committed to helping families navigate the complexities of wealth management and intergenerational transition. My goal is to be the most curious person in today's conversation with Steve Legler, where we explore his journey from a family business successor to a pioneering family enterprise advisor. We'll discuss how Steve's work has led him to reimagine the role of coaching and facilitation in guiding family enterprises through complex transitions. Together, we'll learn Steve's approach to uncovering family dynamics, the role of peer groups, outside advisors, and the importance of proactive family governance. Through these discussions, we'll highlight strategies for sustaining wealth and familial bonds across generations. Now, let's dive in. Welcome, Steve. We're excited to have you here today to share your wealth of knowledge and experiences with us. Let's dive in, shall we?
All right, Corey, thanks for inviting me, and let's see where this goes.
Steve, imagine you're delivering the commencement speech to the graduating class of 2024, and you have the chance to inspire them with your story. How would you begin your speech to convey the incredible lessons and expertise that you've gained along your career?
Wow, you're really bringing me back to when I was sitting there listening to some old guy give a speech. I don't remember who it was or what it was, but I have children. Well, they're adult children now, which might be an oxymoron in some people's books, but who have recently graduated. And I got to sit in some of these, and I don't remember them either, what the people said, but you're giving me a chance to share my life lessons. And I think the biggest one that's been tickling my brain the last little while is how we have no idea what is ahead of us. And so often, I think the people who graduate and they're there and they've been studying some subject for a few years and they have this great idea that I'm going to become a this or I'm going to go into this field. And for a lot of them, the first part of that journey will be something like what they're expecting. But for a lot of them, if you fast forward enough years, they will all end up doing things that they never expected. And that all, you hear people say, oh boy, I studied this stuff and I never use it because now I'm doing that. I think there's a lot more of that than there ever has been. And so I would encourage the people to just keep an open mind about what opportunities are coming in front of them and not be afraid to ask other people in their circle, whether it be their family or mentors or friends, about, hey, I'm seeing this idea and I've been doing this and I don't really love it. What do you think about that? Just to get other perspectives. I think too many people remain stuck in their own head. They remain married to that idea that they thought, oh, I'm going to become a this or a that. And they don't, because of that, they kind of have blinders on and they don't notice some of the opportunities that are out there that just might be the grass that is greener on the other side of the fence. So I think just to keep people's minds open and eyes open to recognizing that we really don't have as much control over so many things as we like to think we do.
Absolutely.
And to take the signals that the universe is sending us and at least entertain an exploration of some other fields that are different from what you thought you were going to do. Because when I hear people a couple of decades later than those typical graduates, and you ask them about their career path, one thing that almost always occurs is a couple of deviations and bifurcations along the way. I used to do this, and then this happened, and then I started to do that. And I think the younger people today, I don't think recognize that that's a common reality. And so they kind of remain married to a certain path, maybe longer than they should.
And Steve, there's so much in there. And I can tell that your approach here really comes from a coaching style, talking about blinders and talking to those around you. It doesn't require a coach to ask you that question, but just even asking the people around what they're seeing. And so from that, your approach, and of course, you don't wear just one hat, and you're not a coach solely, but I know that you do have that educational, those letters behind your name. So in that, and young people who maybe don't have the opportunity, they don't have a coach like you and I to challenge us on some of those thoughts. How do you see that as an opportunity to maybe put some of what we're talking about here in place for themselves?
You know, it's unfortunate that I think too many people don't get coaching or understand what it is. That is changing. It continues to evolve. And I think more and more younger people do get it and understand the benefits of having a coach. I do coach a lot of people. Sometimes I don't even call it coaching, but I'm doing it anyway.
Yes.
It is a field that I discovered right after I finished the FEA program. Somebody had suggested coach training, and that was the biggest inflection point in my life. I remember after doing the first 3-day coaching course that I did, I came home and I said to my wife, I don't care if this ever helps me in my career. I know that this is going to make me a better father and a better husband and a better person. And so I continued with those courses, and it was a complete change of mindset and way of looking at things, and a way of, I hate to use the word helping, but helping people.
Yeah.
Because too many of the people in our lives have all the answers for us and are not shy to share what they think we should be doing. And if that was the best way to get people to do things, boy, the world would be a lot more efficient, because there's a lot of people telling people what to do. And if you just listen to all those people, the world would be great. But that doesn't always work so well. I always say, telling people what they should do is not the best way to get them to do it.
Absolutely.
My dad.
And so from that, when we're talking about the journey that people are taking through life, and family enterprises have a lot of complexities. And as that journey is being forged by any member of that enterprise, how do they take some of those opinions of others? Because as you say, there's so many opinions versus that person thought that they should be doing versus an opportunity that comes knocking, as you say.
Well, so my backstory is that I went into my dad's business because I was told from an early age that that was my duty. And I followed along that path of least resistance for longer than I care to admit. And now when I see people who are in a rising generation of some kind of family enterprise, and they are sort of blindly following, I can easily identify with them and suss out the ones who don't really think that that's where they want to be, but kind of feel like that's where they have to be. And so, to your question, the unconflicted advice is the part that's hard to get, because a lot of people think, I still remember, wow, we had our 25th anniversary of the business that my dad had started, and we had this big event. And I was between my undergrad and my MBA, and all these people, suppliers and bankers and customers, were all coming, and they were all patting me on the back. Wow, this is going to be yours to take over and all that. And I was all pumped up on it too.
Yeah,
because it was like, this must be where I'm supposed to be. And then, less than 5 years later, we had sold the operations, and we're down to 4 people instead of 300. And all of a sudden, my outlook on things changed. But It was actually more of a relief than anything else because I recognized afterwards I didn't really want to run a steel fabrication company. And I didn't really know that I was going to be running a small family office for 20 years either. But I kind of accepted that role. And it took me a while before I finally found my calling. And that was in the FEA program where I realized that, oh my God, there are people who work with families to guide them and bring them on this journey to do all this stuff in the family circle that has nothing to do with the business circle. And I had thought that the business circle was the only circle. Then I realized, well, it's not the only circle, but it's certainly the most important circle. And then I recognized, wait a sec, this family circle, a lot of stuff goes off the rails here, and families don't have as much support from outside professionals in this circle. And then the other part was, I'm actually more comfortable here in this family circle. My grandmother, my mother's mother, who lived with us when I was growing up, she used to say, you should become a priest. And I would laugh at her and think, oh, that's crazy. And then, less than 10 years ago, I was at the Bowen Center in Georgetown with all these people studying family systems theory. And I looked around the room one day and half the people there were clergy. They were ministers and rabbis. And I was like, I guess she saw something in me that my dad didn't see, but he had the blinders on. He needed someone to take over his business. So the fact that I could have done it,
Right.
sort of kept me in that rut and kept me with the blinders on that, well, I can do this. I don't love it, but somebody's got to do it, and it may as well be me. And it was actually a relief to not have to do that, and very much a calling to finally discover that working with families on these kinds of challenges and giving them a different perspective than the one that they kind of grew up with. Whether they end, I mean, I'm not the kind of guy who comes in there and tells people, quit your family business, go do something else. It's not that. But there's a lot of areas in between where guiding people to the right seats on the bus. And maybe you don't have to take over as an operator of the business, and maybe you can just be on the board and be an owner. Though these are kind of options that I think a lot of people don't see. And so if we can, hold up a mirror and show them different opportunities, that's a huge value added for them.
Absolutely. And Steve, you mentioned getting other perspectives, and then you also mentioned unconflicted advice. How do people know when that advice is conflicted?
That's, if I had an easy answer to that, I think we have to put this on people's radar to ask themselves the question. I was talking to some people yesterday and mentioning about like who should be running the family meeting, right? And so we got to talking about, well, the lawyer who draws up the estate plan, can then have a family meeting and explain the estate plan to the rising generation. And that all sounds lovely and better than no explanation. But if I just drew up this estate plan with mom and dad, and now I'm introducing it to the people that are affected by it, am I really wanting to hear their opinion on it to tell me why didn't you do this? I'm going to be there trying to sell what I just did because I'm so smart and I did this and this is how it's going to work. And so now I find myself selling it as a fait accompli, which is to me completely backwards. And I always talk about the tail wagging the dog and families who go to see professionals like lawyers and accountants and tax specialists to figure out how they want to plan their transition. And then they assume that these plans that get drawn up for them will just magically perfectly fit with what the family wants and needs. And I say, wait a sec, can you not take some time and talk to your family and figure out what makes sense for them? And then you can go see those professionals and they'll be happy to know exactly what you want, and they'll be able to serve you even better because they'll be responding to your exact needs. But too many people don't do that because they don't know how, or they don't know where to get the help. And a lot of professionals are in, I'd like to say, too much of a hurry, right? Somebody comes in, we need this. Oh, I know how to do that. I can do it quickly. I can send the bill, get it done. move on to the next one. And it's so convenient because that family who just came in, they were almost the same as the Smith family from 2 weeks ago. So all I have to do is pull those documents out, change a few names, and off I go. And I'm doing all this business, and I'm the big guy in this town, and I'm cranking out all these things, and all the people are coming to me. And next thing you know, everyone has all these, oh yeah, I went to go see the best lawyer in town for this, so my plan must be great. And you know what? It is great until it isn't. But you won't know that until somewhere down the line, hopefully sooner rather than later. But sometimes families only discover the shortcomings in the plans they have when it's too late to change them. And I'm hoping that people are starting to wake up to the fact that just taking the advice as given without a full attempt to involve the people for whom the plans are being made is an oversight.
Right, right. And Steve, I want to go back to your comment about clergy, because I think that is a great way to kind of reflect on a new person in the room, a different person than the lawyers and accountants and tax specialists. And it doesn't need to be somebody from a religious background, although it might be the right person for that family or that member. But I do want to almost compare, and I know that you do a lot of mentorship within the professional space, and thinking about those people in our corner and helping us identify blind spots, and be it a professional, be it maybe somebody within the family, somebody within the business, somebody within the church. How is that coaching mentorship role in somebody's life? How do they build that and seek that out and ask for that?
So are you talking about a person within a family who can kind of play that role?
Or who's looking for that role? Maybe they're saying, look, maybe I've educated myself and I'm on this journey and doing what I think I was supposed to be doing, but now I'm seeing these opportunities and looking for a bit of guidance, and be it a coach, as we talked about, but maybe it's just I'm looking for who are those, call it unconflicted people in my corner.
Right. So I think one area to consider is peer groups. If
Yeah.
you're part of a family business and you can join a peer group through Family Enterprise Canada or any other group where you can then meet with people who are going through the same thing as you, that's pretty unconflicted. But I just want to go back to the clergy thing. There was a video that I saw years ago from the Business Families Foundation with John Davis, who's the guy who came up with the three circle model. And at one point he says, this is the kind of work with families that used to be done by priests and rabbis. And
Yep.
I thought, wow, that just, ticks that box of what I was thinking I'm getting myself into. And then a couple of years ago, somebody contacted me on LinkedIn from the US, and he was trained as a CPA, but he also used to be a pastor in a church. And he was even a chaplain at a hospital. And I set up a call with this guy, and it was like he had got hired by a multifamily office. And I think that was a master hire, because if you want someone to walk in and be comfortable in a family meeting, picture this guy, his job was at the hospital where the whole room is gathering while someone's dying. And he has to walk in there and connect with these people and listen to them and try and make them feel better. Like that guy could go run a family meeting, I don't care, tomorrow morning, because he knows how to do that. And so many people in our industry that are learning how to do more of the family circle stuff,
Yes.
that's the hardest part for many of them, or many of us, to learn how to do, because it's not about having the answer. And what I often say, it's actually more about who I am than what I do, and
Right.
my ability to respond in the right way. And so if you're part of a family and you're recognizing that, wow, our family could be or should be talking about this stuff, but we don't know how. What you were asking about, almost, it started to make me think of like a family champion, like the person
Yeah.
in the family who really, drives we need to bring someone in to help us with this stuff.
Right.
And those are the kind of people who typically will reach out to me. I had someone reach out a couple of weeks ago from a local business in Montreal. And as she was talking to me, I go, oh, and so why are you contacting me? Well, I told my dad to do it, but he wouldn't do it. So I just started to look and I said, I'm going to go and talk to you first. And now I'm going to, so there are people in a lot of families. And this comes from Dennis Jaffe's research of the 100 families that have lasted 100 years. And one of the things they discovered, the ones that managed to succeed to do multiple transitions, there was always somewhere in the family someone who took it upon themselves, because it's typically not a paid role,
Right.
but to make sure that the family is addressing things, to make sure the family is getting together, to make sure the family is having the gatherings, to make sure the family is bringing in resources to start to create something like a family council and or regular family meetings. That somebody has to drive that, and it isn't always someone from the leading generation. In fact, it's often someone from a rising generation, but they need to get the buy-in from the generation above, because that's who has the ultimate decision making and pays the bills. I can't tell you how often people contact me from not the senior generation of their family business, and they want to hire me. And our
Right.
big stumbling block is, well, can someone pay me? Because I love this work, but I don't like to do it for free. But if I can't help them convince someone who can sign a check to pay me, it ain't going to go very far.
Yes.
Right. And that's actually one of the surprises, a negative surprise when I started in this work, that I didn't expect that to happen as often as it sometimes does.
Wow. And so that champion who's listening to us, Steve, who just realized I'm that person in my family, uh, other than picking up the phone, what's that next step? Like, what does that look like to be able to champion this and sell it to the family?
It's hard, because even the idea of a family champion, I when I discovered this existence of this term, I think it was 2018 when Joshua Knox's book came out, that he had taken his PhD research and turned it into a book.
Yes.
And as soon as I heard it, I contacted him, and he and I presented together about it at the Purposeful Planning Institute rendezvous. And then I thought, there's this niche here of coaching family champions, and I tried to figure out how to turn that into something. And it's such a niche within a niche within a niche that it's hard. If someone is listening and they don't have a copy of that book, that's the first thing, is go order that book by Joshua Knox. It's called Family Champions and Champion Families, and read that, and you will at least have a better way to understand and describe yourself.
Yes.
And then find peer groups, join associations, start finding meetings, resources, go out there and find like-minded people, because there are other people that are going through similar challenges, and everyone thinks they're the only one, and they're not the only one. And in this day and age, finding other people who are facing similar challenges to us has never been easier. There's got to be a way with the interwebs that you can find people or whatever.
Absolutely.
And you have to, it's not easy. It's because you have to start to convince people in your family that this is needed. But most families who do actually, have success in doing this, it's because someone has recognized this need and has started to push and has started to say, wait a sec, I think we really need to start to work on some family stuff.
Right. Absolutely. And so going back to deviations, Steve, and this
Yeah.
this what we're talking about is a fundamental shift in the way that a family's thinking, to actually bring some of this conversation. And so it's not always on an individual basis. Eh, as we started with the commencement speech and talking to people as an individual, now thinking about a family, and now we have a group of people who they're individuals within a system, and now we're talking about a deviation, and it might be the deviation that you had in your family, where one day you had an operating business and one day you didn't. That's a big shift, but there's many that happen within, and you brought up the 100-year families. There's many deviations that happen within that. So how within that systems thinking are we able to guide ourselves through that?
Well, I think so. I answered a previous question with, recognizing. I think it was about being conflicted. You have to recognize that there might be someone who might be conflicted. I think families need to recognize that events that happen to their family affect all the members of the family differently. And if the family can recognize that they will face whatever this meteor that came in better together than separately, that's a big aha moment, right? If the family has gotten to the point where they are meeting regularly and they have good relationships, then anything that happens, if they have a forum where they get together to discuss things. I remember when the pandemic hit, and I think it was Jim Grubman said that this was a really great test of family governance, because the families who had not gotten used to having meetings together when the crap hit the fan, they didn't know what to do and they were scrambling. Whereas the families who had already started to instill some kind of regular meeting, some kind of family governance, some kind of forum where stuff happens, okay, we know what to do. We come together and we talk about things like this. That the arrival of the pandemic was a huge test, and some families were well prepared and succeeded through it, and others were it sort of exposed what was lacking. So, biggest thing, I always mention to families when they come to me before they have a problem, I always congratulate them to say the best time to make these plans is before the house is on fire, right?
Right.
But too often people wait until that little, blister turned into a big thing, and now they get rushed to the hospital, and now your options are not as good as they were before.
Right.
So part of what I often am called in to do with a family is to help them to learn to set up a series of regular family meetings so that they can plan and understand and clarify and have dialogues about expectations and where the family wants to go, where the family can go, what the family values are, so that if there's a conflict later, we can rely back on the values to help us figure it out, learn how to work together, learn how to plan together, learn how to have one generation download certain operations and expectations to others so that they can learn. All these things, families work better when they actually have a mechanism and a structure whereby they do that.
Right.
But getting them to realize they need to do that, it takes intention, it takes time, it takes preparation, it takes leadership, it takes all these things that you don't just snap your fingers and say, oh, you know what, we should have family meetings. Let's start having one. We'll have one next week. And then it takes a while. And my dad back in the 80s had joined with CAFE, which was the forerunner of Family Enterprise Canada. And he heard the message that it's important to have family meetings.
Right.
He didn't hear the part about you should bring in an outside facilitator. So he was smarter than everybody else. So he ran the meeting himself. And that was in 1985. And we didn't have another family meeting again until 2006. And that was only because he was diagnosed with cancer. And now it was, oh shit, we have to have oh crap, we have to have a family meeting. So that's what I say to families is like 21 years between meetings is not the recommended interval.
Right.
Right. So you need to get into the habit of doing this. But the reason we didn't have another meeting was because it was not a interesting or fun or whatever experience that we wanted to relive again. So he didn't dare try to call one again because the reaction was not good, because it was not well planned, because it was not well run, because it was not a dialogue. It was a monologue of dad
Yes.
saying, I have this burning desire to tell my family everything I want them to do.
Right.
And as we were saying before, telling people what to do is not always the best way to get them to want to do it. But that's how he felt he needed to do it, and it did not go over well. And I understand perfectly well. And when families talk to me about, well, why do I need you to come in and do this, right? Because when I do my job well, it doesn't look very hard at all.
Right.
It really,
Absolutely.
it really, it's like, oh, what the hell is that guy doing here? It's like the referee at the game. If you didn't notice the referee, it's because they did a good job, right? And so it's a role that some people appreciate and understand right away, and other people don't, and sometimes they try it on their own. I know I've worked with families where they've kind of self facilitated their own meetings for a while because there's someone in the family who has that skill set,
Yep.
and that person is stuck in a situation. And I remember going into this one family, there was 14 of them, and it was the first time they had brought someone from the outside, and the woman who normally used to facilitate, she had the biggest smile on her face because it was like, finally I can just participate like everybody else and not be trying to, we were talking about conflicted situations.
You
That's
took a
tough for somebody to be in.
Absolutely. You took a lot of weight off her shoulder there
Oh, for
to
sure.
be in that room. And so, Steve, I want to go back to your comment about the business circle being the most important circle and how a lot of people view that. And so now we're talking about the family circle and focusing there. And then you also made a comment about the pandemic. So contingency planning and planning for the unexpected. So I guess the what I'm bringing up is the unpopular path, the the going down the road that maybe isn't going to make us a lot of money, or strategizing something in a way that isn't where we're going, but avoiding what we don't want, and having a plan for that. So the unpopular focusing our attention on what's unpopular. How do we get started there?
So I don't know if I'm going right to your question, but what's coming up in my head here is that business circle, I like to encourage people to think of the business as an asset that the family owns. And if there's anything that's happening in the business circle that is somehow going to compromise the relationships in the family circle, my bias is figure out a way to cut that off or do whatever or sell the business, whatever. Don't have the business be the cause of the problems in the family.
Right.
And so take care of making sure that you are looking out for the family members. And some of them are in the business and some aren't. And I hear these stories about how, the son was working in the business and then all of a sudden the dad came and said, oh, by the way, I've just sold the business. And, no warning, no nothing. It's kind of a little bit like my story, but not quite. But the idea that the business circle is more top of mind, I think that's often a function of, founder-led businesses or early in the first or second generation. I think that families that once they've gotten through a few generational transitions, they've often morphed their business or sold the business and started another business or started another business and closed some down.
Right.
So they recognize it more. But too often in early stage businesses, that business it's another child of the founder, and it occupies a lot of the time, and it is the wealth engine and the repository of most of the family's wealth.
Yes.
So of course they are paying a lot of attention to that basket, but when they are focusing so much on that basket to the point where they are neglecting the family part, I think we've all heard stories of people who worked so hard and neglected their families. I'm sure we all know people who did that, and they're doing what they think is best, right? They're
Yeah.
just trying to make the best decisions based on what they know at the time. So it's hard to fault them for that. But I think as outside advisors to such enterprises, part of what we need to do is to hold up that flashlight and say, hey, do you see what's going on here? And some of them will be glad to have it pointed out. to them, and others will hear that you're probably right, but not know how to stop.
Yep.
And they might be too far gone. But that's why my bias is always I I value the family circle more, and I will always try to point families to or push families towards resolutions that keep the family intact, even if that means making changes in the business side. And sometimes they're receptive to that message, and sometimes they aren't. And a lot of advisors are completely the other way, saying it's the business that hired me, so I'm going to go and advise the business, and I don't care about the family. And that's fine. Those people are out there. I think people who took the FEA program, the idea was to expose us to the broader picture.
Absolutely.
Now, where you come down with how you try to advise and guide families is up to each person, and how the leaders of the family take that advice is also up to them. And it would be nice if every story had a happy ending, but they don't.
Right. Yeah. It's a delicate balance of, we as advisors don't want to lead with fear, but
Right.
really what we're saying here is you can neglect that family capital for some time, and maybe it'll be okay. Maybe if you have it in the dark for a while, it will be all right. But there will become a time um, that it will be a major cost that is
Yeah.
unforeseen.
And
So,
I have clients where, unfortunately, they waited too long, and some relationships within the family are damaged to the point where I don't know how well they can be mended, but I will try to bring them the resources that I can to help them do that. But exactly the one situation I have in mind, the idea of somebody leaving the business who's there kind of and doesn't really want to be there, that's part of the next step of hopefully mending the relationship.
absolutely. And so, Steve, as we near the end of our conversation today, there's a few questions that I ask each guest before we wrap up. Are you ready
Yeah.
for the tough ones?
Well, okay, go ahead. I'm always ready. I always say that when I walk into a family, and I'm there and I'm the only one with a different last name around sitting around the table or around the living room, I never know what's coming up. And I have to be ready to respond in an appropriate way. So I never want to know questions in advance, although I think you sent them to me, but I don't know that I remember reading them. So let's go.
Fantastic. So, the first one, what is one key strategy that you believe is the most essential for building a successful family enterprise?
For building the enterprise, if it's a family enterprise, it has to be involving the people in the family as early as possible in the awareness of the business, not necessarily to bring them in, but to make sure that they're aware. So it's okay to come home from work and sit around the table with your kids and talk about dad's business, and this is what we're doing, and this is what we do. And no, you don't have to come and work in the business, but I want you to know, and maybe you'll want to do some other business, and let's learn about business. So entrepreneurs who have a love for business and skill, I think transitioning to the children that are ready, willing, and able to learn about business, whether it's that particular business or another business, I think you can never start too early with that. And so, if you want to have a successful family enterprise, having the transition of that business mindset and business skill early on into the lives of the kids will pay dividends somehow or other, whether it's in that business or others.
I love that. Oftentimes we talk about voice and vote, and really what you're saying here, Steve, is the bare bones minimum is just awareness. Give them the
Yes.
opportunity, give them the knowledge of what's there, and let them make their own decisions. But they don't know the decisions that are being made, or even if they're involved in them, if they don't have the awareness. So that's awesome. Great. Now, what is the most common challenge that you see family enterprises encountering when it comes to wealth transition and generational continuity?
They don't know how to start the conversations that they know they need to have. And so they delay them. There's not a single person who, when you say you really should be talking to your family about this, that says, really? Oh, why? I mean, they know that these subjects should be discussed among their family members, and yet they delay them. They're always too busy, but they also are often scared, and there's some uncertainty involved, and they're worried that the conversation might not go well, and they're really not sure what path they want to take. And so they figure, I can't talk about it till I figured out exactly what I want to do. And that's exactly wrong. You should be having the conversation to involve the people so that you can have an informed decision with some clarity and some transparency of what's involved, so that the people who want to raise their hand and say, yes, I think I'd like to be part of that, or no, I don't want to do that, or yes, but I don't want to be a partner with my sister, like, have those conversations so that you can structure things in a way that responds to the need. But those conversations don't happen easily. And that's why people like me, that's how I've started to explain my role, is I help people to start these conversations and to have them go well, so that they can have these discussions that are very important. Because if you just delay having the discussions, you're just delaying the problem. And the longer you wait, the less good options you have.
I love that. It's not the awareness of the conversations that need to be had. It's the skill set to be able to, and
the
the
courage
environment.
sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah,
The courage.
absolutely. And Steve, in your experience, what are the top three qualities that successful family enterprise leaders possess?
Humility. The ones who do well are the ones who don't act like they're the smartest person in the room. Um, Communication, like being not just knowing how to communicate, but being willing to, like, the openness, the
Yeah,
transparency, the authenticity. Um, and I guess learning how to let someone else have the space that they need to grow. Too often, the leaders are so stuck in their role that they're not willing to give it up, because they don't know what happens after they give it up, right? So that
right.
ability to step aside and let a younger person come and fill your shoes, and actually be glad if they do a better job than you, as opposed to setting them up for failure, so that you can walk around saying, well, I was the only one who could do it. I mean, that's but there are still people who have that attitude. So being able to, be humble and communicate and share, and then know how and when to start to step aside to let others come in and fill that role that you're filling, knowing that you can then go off and get to another chapter of your life where all kinds of other wonderful things possibly await you, if you have the courage to go and look for them. But you have to have somewhere to go. And if you're stuck and you think, I have nowhere to go, then the people behind are going to come and try and push you out. And that's not a recipe for anything good.
Absolutely. And again, some of that uncertainty is maybe the barrier there.
Well, the uncertainty and the fear that comes with the uncertainty, right?
Yeah,
And having the confidence of knowing that it's okay. I've faced uncertainty my whole life, and I've always managed to find a way through it in a positive way. And so sometimes they need coaching, and and the family has to have the right attitude around that too. Because if you're just there trying to push, if my son is pushing me, my first instinct is to push back.
absolutely.
And so it's helping families to learn how to do that dance together, and helping one generation understand why the other generation is acting in this certain way, so that they sort of have a little more understanding and forgiveness towards each other, and hopefully can come together a little bit.
Absolutely. And that perspective is key. Now, Steve, before we conclude our discussion, I'd like to highlight where our listeners can engage in more conversations you're having. And as far as somebody who's having those conversations, you've mentioned some great thought leaders in the space. And I know that you put out some incredible thought leadership. So can you share with our guests where they can find you, as well as some of the resources that you find useful?
Yeah. So I'm easy to find. I have a simple name, Steve Legler. There's only one vowel. It's an E. It repeats a few times. It's easy to spell and say, but not common. So anyone can always find me via Google. My LinkedIn is a great place to find my stuff. SteveLegler.com is my website where my weekly blogs go up, plus other things, all kinds of other content that I'm involved in, either as on this end of a podcast or on the other end of a podcast. The organizations I'm involved in, Family Enterprise Canada, the Purposeful Planning Institute is a wonderful resource for like-minded people like me. The Family Firm Institute is another area where I have a wonderful international network. And so I'm pretty well connected with lots of people. And my social capital is one of my strong suits that I never realized I would have. So if you're looking for someone or whatever, hit me up, and I love to connect people to other people. Or if you have a family business situation with your family or with a client family, and you want to just chat a little bit to get a perspective and some ideas and some areas you might want to explore, I'm happy to indulge. And if you go to my website, there is a link. You can hit my Calendly and book a call with me, and that happens to me a lot. And more often than not, I'm happy to have these meetings. Sometimes they're not perfect, but I'm willing to take the risk of jumping on a call with just about anybody. And so if somebody is listening to this and is inspired by anything I've said or wants to ask a question, hit me up.
Perfect. And we'll definitely include those links in the show notes. And as you say, pretty easy to find otherwise. Now, Steve, I wanted to make sure that we've covered everything today. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with our audience that we didn't get a chance to cover?
Well, I could go on for hours and hours about all things related to this subject, but I think I've said plenty, and I'm glad that I was able to answer your questions in a coherent way. And I got some questions that I'm not used to getting, which I appreciate, and they made me reflect. So happy to have a chance to share with your audience. Thanks a lot, Corey.
Well, thank you, Steve. I appreciate you sharing your expertise and experiences with us today. I found it incredibly valuable, and I'm grateful for your contribution to our episode. And I know that our listeners will as well. As you mentioned, many things that went unsaid, so many questions that I could have asked. So maybe we'll do this again in the future.
All right. Thanks, Corey.
As we wrap up this episode, we invite you to reflect on the invaluable insight Steve has shared on the nuances of family enterprise dynamic and the importance of fostering open communication within business families. Whether you are part of a family enterprise or provide consulting to family businesses, Steve emphasizes unconflicted advice, regular family meeting, and the value of external facilitation, offering a fresh approach to navigating the complexities of family wealth and business management. Throughout our discussion, we reflected on the key aspects of managing family businesses. We talked about the need to balance business goals with family relationships and how important it is to plan ahead and communicate openly. We also discussed the benefits of getting advice from impartial outsiders and having someone guide family discussion. Above all, we emphasized that keeping the family strong is just as important as growing the business. These insights offer a practical approach for families looking to preserve their legacy and tackle the unique challenges of running a family business over multiple generations. For those seeking expert guidance on navigating the complexities of family enterprise and intergenerational wealth transitions, Steve Legler and the team at Blackwood Family Enterprise Services are ready to assist. You might also want to pick up a copy of his insightful books, Shift Your Family Business and Interdependent Wealth. and we've included the information together with additional resources in the show notes to support you on your journey. Thank you for joining me, Corey Gagnon, your host of Legacy Builders Podcast. It's my personal passion to explore with you these topics related to family wealth. If you enjoyed today's episode, you can subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your preferred podcast platform. And don't forget to share this episode with family, friends, and colleagues who you care about. If you'd like to help support this show, you can do so by leaving a rating and review. If you have any questions about anything shared on today's episode, or have topics you'd like us to dive deeper into in future episodes, please let us know by emailing beaconfamilyoffice@asante.com. That's beaconfamilyoffice@ASSANTE.com. Legacy Builders, Strategies for Building Successful Family Enterprises is brought to you by Beacon Family Office at Asante. Are you worried about losing what you've created and seeking ways to transition your wealth across generations? Beacon Family Office at Asante supports our clients transition their wealth while maintaining relationships. If you'd like to access more content we've created, you can visit us at beaconfamilyoffice.com or for more details on our services and book an initial call. Thanks again for listening, and until next episode, stay intentional about building your legacy. This program was prepared by Corey Gagnon, who is a senior wealth advisor with Beacon Family Office at Asante Financial Management Limited. This is not an official program of Asante Financial Management, and the statements and opinions expressed during this podcast are not necessarily those of Asante Financial Management. This show is intended for general information only and may not apply to all listeners or investors. Please obtain professional financial advice or contact us at beaconfamilyoffice@asante.com or visit beaconfamilyoffice.com to discuss your particular circumstances prior to acting on the information presented.